The jails face an explosion of violence due to the shortage of Tornado Squad prison riot officers. We're going to read into this exclusive from The Independent, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an exclusive from The Independent with the headline that jails face an explosion of violence due to a shortage of Tornado Squad prison riot officers. The exclusive reveals that prisons in the grip of alarming shortage of tornado riot officers, the government admits. Guys, while you're here, before I give my initial thoughts, if you can hit the like button and share it across social media so others are notified of this video. So we're already quite if you're not aware, there's been a case that prisons specifically in England. I can't speak for Scotland, but specifically in England and Wales, have been dealing with a great deal of overcrowding. They've been unable to get a grip on the flow of criminals and dealing with them. And one of the ways that they've been looking at dealing with them has been the case of actually trying to reduce some sentences, reduce the time that they spend in prison and letting them out about a couple of weeks early or something like that, probation, to try and help mitigate the amount of it. But this explosion of violence, this is incredibly distressing and very concerning, to say the least. Why is this happening? Why are we not getting a grip on this? Why is this out of control? Is a couple of questions that I ask myself, and I think it's just because one of the issues, and it wouldn't surprise me if this comes up in the article as we talk about this, is that there is not enough experienced officers in this area now, and many people just don't want to be prison officers. They just don't want the hassle of dealing with the hustle of it. It's just not worth the pay. It's not worth it anymore. So those who have had long-term experience, who have been a part of working in these prisons for long times, obviously are hanging up their boots and retiring and whatnot. And there's many people who come into this as prison guards and officers and don't stay very long in it because it's just not feasible for them. The pay's not good enough, and the experience obviously is not ideal either. So that is just a number of many of issues that are taking place with the prison system as itself. Now, obviously, the fact that we have are we having prison riots and we just don't know about them, that are taking place in the UK? It's not something that's really talked about, but maybe it's something that maybe we should be a bit concerned about. Are we looking after our prisoners properly? And I think that's a question we need to ask. We need to be asking the prisoner minister on this one, that's for sure. So let's read a bit more into it, guys. So the number of prison officers trained to deal with riots as part of the so-called tornado squads has plummeted by a third, The Independent can reveal, as new figures lay bare the staffing crisis blighting UK jails. As I said, there's a staffing crisis here, and that's going to be the problem. The officers, who are part of a 50-strong group armed with batons and shields, saw a surge in deployment in prisons last year as the beleaguered system battles a surge in violence and disorder amid a staffing crisis and overcrowding. As I said, not enough people want to be in, not enough want to be, and there's all sorts of reasons. And I think pay is one of the reasons why people would not want to be a prison officer. Why would you want to take that abuse and possible face violence from some of these officers if you're not even going to get decent money for it? As you know, at least decent money for it. Depletion coincides with a spike in violence in prisons, despite demands for their specialist skills at its highest in years. Ministers have admitted nearly 700 fewer of these prison officers are available than in 2018, when 2,310 were on hand to tackle the most serious prison disturbances. The concerning figure, triggered by a surge in such officers quitting the service, have prompted fears that jails are becoming increasingly vulnerable to violence, instability and controlled by gangs. The Justice Secretary Alex Short said to have warned Rishi Sunak that the overcrowding crisis could trigger a wave of riots. Tornado squads were deployed 13 times in prisons last year alone. 13 times they needed them. More than any other year since at least 2018, and up from mid-COVID low just 4 times in 2021. A series of parliamentary questions by Labour has uncovered. More than half of Tornado Squad's call-outs in the past 2 years were young offenders institutes and women's prisons, the Minister Edward Agard told his Labour counterpart Ruth Cadbury. So youth offender institutes and women's prisons have been on this as well. It comes as figures show an assault on prisons and staff soared by 20% in the year to September, with more than 25,000 instances in a single year. 25,000 instances in a single year. I don't know what should be a reasonable number, but and what is and probably people who are, if somebody has experience obviously in this area, please enlighten me. But 25,000 instances in a single year. Sorry, but that seems way too high. That seems way too high to me. But that should be much, much lower. And it shows just how vulnerable that people who work in these prisons are. It shows the vulnerability. It really does. Violence in the women's estate skyrocketed to an all-time high, overtaking men's prisons for the first time. The Shadow Justice Secretary Shabina Mahmood told The Independent, "No wonder these new figures showed a huge decrease to the number of specialist officers who could be deployed to deal with these dangerous and difficult situations across our prison estate, including riots. This is another sign of the scale of our crisis in our prisons and the failure by the government to take this crisis seriously." In addition to Tornado Squads, which comprise local officers who volunteered to be deployed to tackle dangerous situations across the prison's estate, a separatist group often described as the prison system's SAS was called out more than twice a day this year. Routinely armed with pepper spray, smoke bombs and batons, and wearing flame-proof uniforms, anti-stab protection vests and armoured gloves, the National Tactical Response Group units were deployed 794 times in 2023. An increase of nearly 40% of the previous year. That's just massively. That's a massive difference there. 742 times. That's a massive jump. Massive jump. And 40% increase from the new year. That just tells you just how chaotic things are getting right now for them. Well, Mr. Angar told Parliament that the government has no minimum staffing requirements for the Tornado Squads. Unions suggest a contingency of at least 2,100 volunteers is the official recommendation, well above the 1,592 available in November, which rose slightly to 1,620 last month. Warning that prisons are operating under extreme pressures with a current concentration of higher risk of more violent prisoners, emit emergency measures to release low-risk offenders early. Tom Weekly, head of the Prison Governors Association, said this makes it more likely that there will be disorder. Despite the prison service training more new Tornado officers than ever, retention rates are alarmingly low. And this is exactly what I said right at the start of the video. Retention rates are alarmingly low. That just speaks massive volumes there. This is a concern to prison governors, as the ability to swiftly restore order and control in our prisons is essential to maintaining prison capacity and the safety of staff, prisoners and the public. Expressing alarm but not surprise at the drop of Tornado volunteers, the Prison Officers Association warned it could not recall a time where there was a shortage of interest in carrying out Tornado roles, and said that 1,592 officers available in November could well be an all-time low. Officers don't get any real additional payments for putting themselves on the line. There is no real difference between the pay rate for a Tornado duty and bed watch, the union chief Steve Gunn told The Independent. Why is there not a pay difference? Why should I sign up for something when I'm not even going to get additional pay for it? What's the benefit for it? I straight away off the bat, you're going to ask them to be part of the Tornado duty, and you're not even going to give them any additional, any proper real pay here. Straight off the bat, like why? Why would you do it? It just makes logical sense to say to me, well, pay me more. Like that will be the obvious answer. They need to change that immediately. Adding that they've taken them for granted, and now it's come home to roost. Absolutely, they've taken advantage of them. Work more for less. This is the philosophy that I keep seeing a lot, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop, this whole concept and the application that I hear all the time about of working more for less. Yeah, it's not right. You know, everyone is worth a value, and to be asking to do more for less is not right, especially in a job such as that, where you're putting yourself in harm's way as well. Labelling the shortage a wake-up call for everyone, which could have a knock-on effect for staff and prison safety. Mr. Gilligan warned that the last thing you want is not having enough trained personnel to deal with the incidences throughout the services, and that's a major thing as well, because they're also suffering with shortages. When there is an incident and there's not enough people to deal with it, those instances can literally just light a fire and could start a riot just from nothing, when all you needed was one or two extra officers in a small incident that could literally turn into a massive one, and it could all been avoided if there was just one or two more personnel there if needed. Officers are nearly on their knees. Morale is rock bottom. He added the prison service is just in crisis on everything from overcrowding to assaulting rising. The tornado instances are on the rise. Officers are stretched to their limits. The Justice Secretary announced drastic measures this week to release prisoners up to 60 days early after prisoners came dangerously close to running out of space. It is said to have warned Downing Street that the crisis could soon trigger riots. Mr. Gilligan added there is no denying there could be a risk of disorder, and there is a real concern because that means potentially more prisons being put out of action, he said, adding, "We can't afford that at the moment. We need an adult conversation in this country about how many people are being locked up." When Stranaway's riot happened in the 1990s, there were 43,000 prisoners then, and they were talking about overcrowding them as one of the causes. So it appears we've learnt nothing, because 40 years later, we've now got 88,000 prisoners. Echoing calls from the HM Chief Prison Inspector Charlie Taylor to this publication in December, he urged all political parties to stop posturing and said, "We need an adult conversation in this country about how many people are going to be continued to lock up," reiterating demands for a root and branch royal commission to the state and to the justice system. A prison service spokesperson said, "The safety of all our staff and prisoners is our priority, which is why we're bolstering our tornado teams by training more than 800 staff this year to deal with serious incidents. This is on top of our £100 million investment to tough security measures to clamp down on violence and improve safety." And again, guys, regurgitation from the government, and that's all it is, regurgitating stuff. Not enough whatsoever from this government. Obviously, there needs to be, a cross-party consensus, obviously, to help these prisons, because they are getting overcrowded and these problems are continuing. Like many other issues that are taking place in our country, this is only going to add to the rest of issues that are taking place if they're not dealt with. And we know this government don't give a damn. We know they're not going to be doing anything about it. They're saying we're putting this in, we're putting that in, we're putting this in. But are they getting a grip on this? Are they really getting a grip on the prison system? And my answer, honestly, is no. They've not done enough whatsoever to allow this. They've allowed this to happen. They've not built enough prisons, and they're making it harder for people and they're making more crimes, obviously, and increasing the law and making more people go to jail for even some of the most smallest of crimes. They're trying to lock them up, and it's like you need to have a balance here. There doesn't appear to be a balance, and these some of the protesters are being locked up and thrown in prison for some of their acts, and I'm thinking about some of the more violent and more dangerous criminals that we have in the country, and they may not be in a prison space for them because of the direction that we are going at the moment. And there are lots of people there are lots of crimes, in my opinion, that doesn't need criminal time, that just needs community service. If there's a continuation of crime coming from the same person, then obviously prison time is what they needed. But if we're talking about somebody who's done a theft or done a robbery, physical physical assault, obviously that's one that should be obviously debated depending on what the situation is on a case by case basis. But there are some crimes where prison time is not needed, and not just slapping with a fine, but even community service can mitigate rather than the needs of obviously putting them in prison. So I think that is something that should be used as an alternative to help reduce the capacities of prisons as well. But again, it depends on what the crime is. Obviously, we're talking about the highest echelons of like violent assault, murder, sexual assault, and rape. Obviously, all of them need to be obviously prison. But some other crimes like cannibalism or drugs, for example. Those smoking weed or whatever. Like, do they need to be locked up and thrown away, like drug trafficking and that, like where like these are lots of questions that need to be answered, and the overhaul of the system of how much time these slots should be spent in prison, and should some of these, rather than be spending time in prison, be spending long times on community service and something or whatnot. So these are lots of questions that I think need to be answered with them. But what do you guys think? What do you make of the prison system, the issue that they're going through right now? Do you think that increasing the pay for the tornado squads would help recover it? Do you think that there's not enough benefits for prison staff who are working in the system to encourage people not only to join it but to stay within the system? What do you guys honestly think about this and the violence that's continuing to escalate within our prison systems? Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. If you found this video interesting, please hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video, and subscribe because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further and financially support me in the work I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content there as well. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.